Welcome to biology. Thank you for being here. We're continuing on with our conversation about mitosis. And with this, though, the biggest focus is really looking at this scientific literature or this real, you know, publication, science publication here. So uh, you'll notice that there's parts where I do want you to try reading it and see how much you understand. And to be honest, when I've done this in my academic career in high school and in college, one of the biggest things to keep in mind is uh, these can be really difficult and really dense with information. And oftentimes to really comprehend, to really understand what you're reading, you got to go through it multiple times, and that's for anybody, right? So keep that in mind. It does take what I would call, hard work to really read through these. That being said, I'm not asking that you read the entire thing. I'm going to ask that you read a couple parts because, as you can see with the title here, it is an article that is, or a publication that is really related to what we've learned about. We have already learned about protein synthesis and mRNA and how that gets translated to create amino acids and proteins. And we're now learning about mitosis. And so this experiment, these scientists here conducted this experiment. So that's what these scientific publications are about. They have to talk about, why are they doing this experiment? What were the procedures that they used for this experiment? And then what were the results? And then with that, they have to discuss the results and what do they think the results mean to share that with you. So this is a pretty standard publication in the way that it's laid out. And so with that, again, I do want to practice reading parts of it because I think we will learn more about what we need to with this mitosis and how mRNA can be used to regulate the process. So we'll read about that a little bit, but you'll notice that the questions really don't ask you, what did we learn from this, or what is the author saying, but more, what is the purpose of this section? Okay, and so again, every professional publication is really going to be outlined very similarly, and so it's important to understand what are the different parts and why do they put them in there. And so then in the future, as you look at these and are possibly required to read the whole thing, maybe you have a better understanding of what you're looking at and what you're reading. So first question you'll see, and I'll go through the whole activity here to help you. This is what I've done in class because this is a hard one, I would say, to do really on your own. But let's talk about it. So first, I want you to read the abstract, and then after you read it, just what is the purpose of the abstract? Okay, so if you're doing this with me on the video, pause the video, and then take a moment to read this. Okay, so hopefully you actually did that. Now, what is the purpose of the abstract? So, purpose of the abstract is to really give an overview, and I would encourage you to use complete sentences for the sake of this video and time. I'm gonna speed it up a little bit. So, give an overview to why this study is important. Share key findings, like what did they learn from their experiments, and a brief summary of what let's go why it is what the results mean. Sorry, I'm trying not to say what I'm already said. So really, the abstract is an overview of everything that's truly important. So oftentimes, if you're trying to figure out, okay, what is this about? You need to read the abstract. And if you conduct your own experiments and you find yourself possibly in a higher level science class, possibly in college, you might be required to do this type of kind of reports, if you will. And writing an abstract can be very difficult because oftentimes you spend days or weeks, possibly months. In the professional world, months to years is pretty normal. And now you got to put everything you've just done into a paragraph, right? And so abstracts can be difficult. So now select all that apply. What did the reader learn from the abstract? And we kind of said it here, but the key findings of the research experiment, a brief explanation of why they conducted the study, and a brief analysis of the results. That is the goal of an abstract. So really, uh, if we can remember anything, the abstract is really going to be a great spot start to where you want to read. Next, I did want you to read this eLife Digest part, and you'll notice here that eLife Digest is where this article, where this report was published, and so they've inserted this part here into the report, and it was not necessarily written by the author. So I want you to think about like, okay, well, one, let's read it because I do think it's written differently than the rest of the report, and it's written in a way that hopefully is more understanding or easier to understand, I should say. So take a moment to read this, and then we're going to look at question 3 here. And pause the video. Okay, so hopefully you read that. What is the purpose of the eLife Digest section? Uh, you can tell that I already selected this and doesn't let you deselect it. I would try doing that. So the purpose of this section is really to provide relevant background knowledge. It gives a real good overview of what are cells, what is mitosis, very briefly, and then how proteins can impact the cell cycle and the timing of the cell cycle, right? And so that's background information that you may or may not have already had before looking at this report. And so they're really trying to support the reader to understand what the goal of this publication is and what the experiment is. Now you'll see, with a couple of these spots, this is continuing the report, the official publication, and it can be really difficult to read. So I would encourage you to do so, but I am not requiring you. So I tried labeling that to make it as clear as possible. It's really long, right? Pages and pages. The results section, for example, that can be some of the most boring and difficult reading you've ever done. If you want to put yourself to sleep, you might learn something, but it is usually dense. And the results section is where the author has to share their results, but they don't analyze the results. That's a different part of the report. So sharing the results is basically trying to put a graph or lots of graphs. So looking at these graphs and putting it into words. So it's very bland. It's very difficult at times to comprehend and to track, at least in my opinion. But it does help you make sense of these graphs more. Okay. But I want to, again, not focus quite on the content of it, but I would encourage you to give it a shot. But I want to bring our attention to question 4 here and looking at this figure 1. It says, this is a figure caption. What is the purpose of a figure caption? And based on this example, when is a figure caption necessary? So looking at this, right, you might have been taught what a figure caption is before, so excellent, you can put that in there. If I go ahead and zoom in, okay, and just read a little bit of this or kind of glance at it, Figure 1, cell synchronization, analysis of translation efficiency during the cell cycle. And then it's got A and B and C labeled. So these are actually titles or short explanations of what is going on in these different charts and graphs and images. So going back to this question, what is the purpose of a figure caption? It is to basically briefly explain what is the reader looking at? What is graph A saying, or graph B? What is their purpose? What is that showing us? You'll see that there's not a bunch of titles. That is in the figure caption. So based on this example, when is a figure caption necessary? It's necessary anytime you put in a data table, a graph, an image that you're using to support the results and showing the reader your results. So a figure caption then is going to be a brief explanation of what you're looking at. All right, and then again, more results. Oh, lots of results, lots more graphs, more figure captions, lots more results. You can imagine that pages and pages of reading this could be very dense and kind of hard to track. But again, you're welcome to give it a shot. Okay, more images to argue and well, not necessarily argue, but to support what their experiment was doing and their findings. More and more pages. And then finally, we get to this next section. So it's question 5 here, the discussion. Okay. Looking at the question here, the author just spent 7.5 pages writing and showing the results of the research they conducted. What do you think the purpose then of the discussion section is? So taking a moment to think about that. The discussion section will be to really analyze and share the author's perspective of what the results are telling us. Okay, they just said A equals A, but now the discussion might be, well, why is it significant that A equals A? And of course, that's just a random example, but all these different results and data that they just showed us, they have to tell us, why is this important? What are the connections that we can make from this data? Then question 6 here, it's right from the first sentence here. It says the author of this article referenced previous work, and then in the parentheses wrote Fan and Penman, 1970. Why do you think they included the names and date in the parentheses? What is the purpose of this? Hopefully you've seen this before, as it is very common practice in science especially. But Fan and Penman are going to be authors or scientists that conducted an experiment in 1970. And so by referencing their experiment, and let me rephrase this, this means that they're published. Okay, this means that they're not just random schmucks that made a public or made an experiment, but they went through the scientific process and got it published, and their work has been accepted by the scientific community. And so by referencing their work, it validates some of the legitimacy of this article and this experiment. And so they're making connections to previous work, that they're then building on that and developing the learning of the community, right? That's really the goal of science in general, is to add to the layers of learning and depth of our knowledge. So what is the purpose? It's really to give credit to this and to create a sense of legitimacy to their article as well. All right, again, scrolling down, I should have said you do not need to read this here. Number 7, okay, materials and methods is the next section. Look at the materials and methods section. Do not read unless you want to. You can. But why is it important that authors take the time to include the materials and methods of their research? So to give more of an overview again, materials and methods is really going to be like the procedure, the step by step. We did this for 2 minutes, then we did this, then we added this, whatever their process was. And the goal then is that anyone in the science community could know exactly, okay, I need this, this, and this. I need these materials. And then if I follow their exact process, can I get the same results? It's very important that other people can get the same results, because if no one else can get the results that they claim to have gotten, then that science, this article, this publication gets thrown out. It's like, no, this was maybe a fluke. Maybe it was random chance, or maybe they lied. And that's really bad, right? Especially in the science community. That is your entire career and reputation, that you cannot lie with the results. And so a part of kind of keeping you honest, you have to create these materials and methods sections so that people can copy it. And if they don't get the same results, that's really bad. So you want people to get the same exact results that you got, or at least close enough. And so that's really important in creating, again, a more valid and a more legitimate, say, yeah, everyone got these same results in different labs. That really means that this is a true kind of reflection of what's going on. And so that's really important. Right. Last question here. We have all these references. So reference section, pages and pages of references. And so hopefully this may be an easier one, but why has the author included references? And giving you a moment to think about it, it really comes back to what we just said earlier, right? These are all the different articles and publications that have already been accepted by the science community. And now they're referencing it to create more validation and legitimacy to their publication. They're not just making this stuff up. They have these resources. This is where they got the information. This is why they said what they said and the connections that they made. And so then we can build on the science. And that's really important. Okay, so I know that was a lot. And so I appreciate you for working hard through that. The last little bit here is reflection. And I'm not going to go through and answer all of these, but I do want to focus on this last part here. Pick a prompt, okay? Option 1, tell a story, or option 2, you can investigate. So the question is, have you ever seen an article or story in the news or on social media that talked about science? And then I see it all the time, right? Whether I'm on Instagram or Facebook, which I know you probably don't use, but maybe TikTok, whatever it is, you'll see news stories. You'll see stories of, the vaccine and blah, 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 right? That's a big one that I see over and over right now, especially. But maybe you've seen other science-related articles. The pandas going extinct, whatever it is. Those are science-related articles. So can you tell me, maybe go back and look it up. It's like, oh, I remember one from the other day. Maybe. What was the article about? What was the science from it, right? So let's go to the panda one. So if pandas going extinct, well, that's kind of ecology, and it's talking about the health of or the fitness, I should say, of the species. So there's kind of a little bit about the science. And maybe that article says, well, it's because humans are taking their habitat, or maybe some invasive species is stealing their food source. So what was kind of the science? And then you might consider, well, how is the information presented? I see a lot of articles that it comes from a single author who's telling a story about something that they've come across. Very rarely, at least in my experience, is it anything like this. This is a true primary resource for scientific information and learning. And I've never seen one of those on social media. So How is the information being presented? And that leads into, do you think the source is trustworthy? Can you really evaluate, well, is this author sharing an opinion on a matter? Are they trying to persuade you by telling you certain facts of a scenario, right? And oftentimes that is the case. So if you haven't had this experience, I want you to take a moment to look for one. And it can be a news article, so you can look on Google and try and find a news article. But I really encourage you, if you have access to social media of any platform, with parental approval, can you find an article that's talking, or a story that's talking about science of some kind, and then evaluate it? And the discussion I really wanted to have, so I'll put it here, is true scientific publication is very difficult. These scientists take weeks to months to years to focus on what they're doing, to put this lab together, to complete the experiment, to gather results, and then to analyze results with a community of individuals that have really spent their life, for the most part, trying to learn more about whatever this topic is. And that alone is really difficult. Then you just saw, like a 12-page paper where they have to figure out, how can they communicate this? Why is it important? What are the results that we got? Can someone copy what I just did? How can I make this as legitimate as possible, so that other scientists can try to copy me? And honestly, scientists will try to prove that this experiment was false. And it's not until they go, okay, it actually worked, this is the results, that the science community then agrees we can accept this article. So you cannot just be published in the science world because you want to be published. You have to have your work accepted by the scientific community, which can be very critical and very difficult. So when you read a scientific article, you should feel confident that this is real. This is what hundreds of people have agreed upon, that spend their lives working on this, and this is what the lab, the experiment, is showing us. But sometimes then someone else, like on these oftentimes social media platforms, will look at something like this and go, and make a political statement. We'll put their opinion in it. We'll try to say, no, this is wrong. Okay, and those are what I'm trying to share with us, can be very dangerous, right? If we look at this like, oh, well, they talked about science, they know what they're talking about. I would like to make us aware that just because they're talking about science or they reference science doesn't mean they went through this very critical, difficult scientific process to get this published. They could be just some schmuck in the bottom of their, in their downstairs basement writing an article, and they happen to have an online platform to share it to. So keep that in mind, and that really was part of the goal of this assignment. So please let me know if you have questions and how I can help you. And excellent work. And we will continue on with mitosis next week.